get started in just a couple of minutes. Good evening, Amy. Welcome.
Hello, Amy.
Amy's not listening to anybody.
I'll speak in sign language.
Did you spell out Amy? Someone put it on a sign, you know, Amy.
A.M.
You're off.
There we go.
Did you put all on your little post-it?
But I got the blur on, so here,
I
let's
can't see. Put it on your forehead. It'll work.
It's the vodka you were talking about.
All right, everyone. It is now 7:00 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year to all of you. It certainly was a good one. As Lucas pointed out, he didn't have to go out and do some snow shoveling and plowing, as our plows also stayed off the road. That's really good to have, and safe for people that were commuting around. So we are going to ask for any declaration of pecuniary interest. Anybody have one? I don't see one. All right. And we're going to go into number 4, and that's reports from staff. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mattina, talking about the Mapleton Parks and Recreation Strategic Master Plan update. Mr. Mattina.
Good evening, everyone. So my report, which has been submitted through the agenda, speaks to the updated master plan, which is an update to the 2012 report that was master plan that was previously in effect. The plan was developed by Stempsky, Kelly and Associates, and Sean Kelly, just checking in now, is with us tonight to answer any questions that council may have, as he's the author of the report. So just some background to the process. The master plan process began in early 2018 with a review of the 2012 plan accomplishments. And the plan, or the process, actually was interrupted a number of times through COVID, which started in early 19, as we all know. So that brings us to a completion of that plan in late 2020 because of that. So many things, were happening during the whole period of COVID and the period that the plan was being developed. And, a lot of things have materialized through just regular operational osmosis. Things were contemplated, things developed during the period and were consequently adopted. And, as the plan was being created. So these things there's sort of an overlap in the plan where we're sort of ahead of the game a little bit with what the plan is actually delivering. The plan was developed with intake from all the stakeholders, and it was also recommended, was reviewed and recommended by the Parks and Rec Committee as well. It begins with an overall inventory and condition assessment of all assets that exist in the parklands. And then it recommends future upgrades and improvements. And it also lays out 14 strategies for actions under 3 main categories. So the 3 main categories are general strategies. The general strategies deal with efficiencies, creating and delivering leisure programming, and defining the quality of the parks and facilities. The second strategy is connections, and it speaks to movement of users around the township, identification, distribution, and improvement of the infrastructure. And the third strategy is the implementation strategy to manage the actual plan, and includes a capital budget for the next 5 years. So the plan is intended to take us into 2026 with parks operations, and it's a dynamic plan with changes happening as we go. There's been things happening over the years, over the recent years, especially with COVID and the presentation of programs through the Ontario government with related to grants, and we've taken advantage of some of those. There's also been park development initiatives that we've explored, namely the foot of Drayton Queen Street and the park development there, and the ensuing relationship there with Kinsman and that development of that park. So it's an exciting plan. It describes the past and brings us into the future for 2026. As I mentioned, Sean Kelly is here tonight, and he's the author of the report, and he's available to answer any questions. We also have staff on the presentation here, should any questions be required from them.
Thank you, Ms. Martina. Mr. Kelly, did you want to add anything at this point in time before we get into questions?
Yeah, I might just, good evening, everyone. I might just add a couple of quick points to this. When we do these projects, they're very fluid. I want everyone to understand that no one's asking for the budget in totality. It's really up to the municipality at hand to decide what projects are going to be coming out of the recommendations. And that's really important to know, because I know you can get sticker shock on some of this. But some of these initiatives are carried off from the 2012 plan and built upon. Many initiatives have been taken into account already. I see Amy's on the line, and I actually see Lucas. Both those positions were part of the 2012 plan. So, there's been improvements already seen and realized through earlier works. But I just want everyone to know that these are recommendations coming from the consultant based on their experiences, what we see, the public consult, all those things that come into play when we make our decisions, and we provide them as recommendations within the plan. It's a decent plan, certainly for a community this size. And those are the size communities we do work in. We work in rural communities all the time. It's specific to the work we do. I just want to ensure everyone knows that Sam was asking me some questions previously. I just wanted to relay to him that any of the concerns that might come about, or concerns that he's trying to address and hearing about, are not unique to Mapleton. We're seeing them elsewhere as well. So I'll just add that as a kind of just a follow-up to Sam's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. So now that we have the preliminary talk from Sam and Sean, we'll open it up to council. Everyone has a paper copy that they were sent to them for the overview. So we'll open it up to council for discussion at this point. Don't everybody jump at once. Mr. Douglas.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's an interesting read. A few things that I picked out of it that I'd like to see. Lots of discussion on trails and expansion of trails and accessibility, which is all good things. I thought it was interesting the lack of support, I guess, for a dog park, which has come up to council a few times. I think the stat was like 46% of respondents. I can't remember the exact wording, but not really supportive of a dog park. But I just want to kind of focus on the outdoor rink at the PMD, and there was a budget of $50,000 for future works or development of that space. I'm just wondering if that money, with the work that we did this year with expanding and moving that rink, is that the 50,000, or is there another 50,000? And before we put any more money towards that, I'm just wondering if that's the best location, and maybe have some discussion about that. If there's a more central location rather than up behind the arena, especially if we're looking at with the grant potential of expanding that area and future parking needs. I'm just a little hesitant to invest, any more money really in that location without, exploring other options.
I'd be happy to speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead,
Mayor?
Ms. Martina. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas, for that. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the anticipated cost in the plan of $50,000. I mean, the rink is already built, and I can report that we have not spent anywhere near $50,000. The cost so far is around $8,000, and there's I think the 50,000 would be the ultimate, or it wouldn't even reach that. I mean, there's talk about regular hockey boards, like regular rink boards, around the perimeter of the rink, and make it an oval as opposed to a rectangle. And I don't have a cost on those, but the rink boards are very expensive. It would help to have a higher sides on the rink to help with blowing snow and conditions that exist. But I don't anticipate, even if the boards were added, if that was a desire, I don't anticipate the cost to be up in the $50,000 range. With respect to the location, ideally, that is a good location because we are using the Olympic ice finisher to finish the surface. And as you know, it's parked inside the arena. And so the proximity of having that machine close by certainly helps with the condition and the quality of the ice. We've also got water readily available, power readily available. All those things are there. So we chose that location for its proximity to those amenities, and it just makes it so much easier and so much cost effective. Everyone is used to going there for ice, so it just made sense for us to pick that location.
Thank you, Sam. I know, you got follow up there, Mr. Douglas?
Yeah, just a quick. So Sam, is using the ice resurfacer, is that new this year? That wasn't done last year, was it? Is it just with the bigger surface this year that you're able to do that?
That's correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, we did not use the ice finisher last year, but last year was a sort of a impromptu ice making machine, sort of let's do it, and we quickly slapped it together. But this year we put some thought into it. We put a proper base in the fall, plastic liner, all the good things that should be incorporated into a good ice rink. So we have quality ice out there right now. We've had some issues this week with weather, giving us some problems it took us a while to actually get the ice perfected, but I think we've perfected the process, and we've got some quality ice out there right now for use.
Thank you. So Sam, just to follow up there with Councillor Douglas, so the $50,000, and maybe Mr. Kelly has a better answer than you do, where did that $50,000 come from in the first place? Because a lot of people do outdoor rinks, and it certainly doesn't cost even $8,000 that you're saying that we paid. I'm kind of curious where the $8,000 came from to pay for a rink in the back. How is that $8,000 to put up some boards and a plastic liner and to put water on it?
So Sam, maybe I'll jump in here. When we provide prices, we're basing that on our experience, and obviously we can work within a range, or sometimes we just give you the price. That would be a high-sided rink, concrete pad put in there, probably a multi-sport court during the summer months. It would probably have lighting brought to it, and we appreciate the fact that there is actually servicing on the site already, water there, as well as ice finishing, surfacing. So it can grow, Councillor Davidson, really quickly in price. And sure, in our work, we deal with Cadillacs and Pintos. I mean, and trying to find a happy medium that works for every municipality is a bit of a guessing game. Yeah, you can do it cheaper and much less expensive, and that meets your needs. By all means, that's what you want to be doing. But you might get to a point. Down the line, if weather's agreeable and that sort of thing, and demand is there, that you will find that the economy of scale plays in here, and a better facility means less staff time and longer life. And $50,000 is actually not a lot. I know some of these outdoor rinks going in at about 150 grand. So it's kind of asinine to think about it in our day and age. That's how I look at it. With our climate and the way it's going, but it's not to say they aren't more expensive. But if you can do it certainly less expensively, I would be sticking with that until your needs change.
Mr. Kelly, Mr. Bettina?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may speak to the cost so far. So as I mentioned, we've got a sand base, and we placed that in the fall. So we had a few loads of sand and a grader out to grade the area. So that's the sand was worth $2,000. We've got a couple of days with a grader and a grade man and the laser. That's another $3,500. We've got the rink boards that we've actually formed up the sides, $650. We've got people to install those boards, $270. 2 rolls of plastic at $500 a roll. There's another $1,100. And then 3 people, 2.5 hours, put the plastic down, tape it all up, get it ready. It was a windy day when we did it, and there's always factors. So there's another $225. So far we've got $8,100 in costs. In the future, I think like next year, for instance, if we do this again, we're going to save on the plastic costs. We're going to save on the sand costs. We're going to save on the board costs. So, next year might be closer to maybe $5,000 as opposed to $8,000. So there will be savings in some of the material not having to be repurchased.
Thank you for that explanation, Sam. I know that it is a question that was brought up when we first started talking about this at a couple of council meetings ago. And I noted that in the plan, it's $50,000, but then you have one in Alma, and it's $15,000. So obviously different rinks that you were talking about there. Mr. Martin, you got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to chime in on the rink part a little bit. I think in my mind anyway, I kind of compartmentalize it up into two things, right? I think that this outdoor rink, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it came out of like a Mapleton EOC meeting, right? Where we decided, I think you decided, Mr. Mayor, that an outdoor rink is a good idea, considering the COVID situation that we're in. And it really appears that we were ahead of the curve again by starting off a rink for this year. So I think it'll probably get some good use. And in hindsight, it's been a great idea. I think moving forward, if we look at making it a permanent part of our Parks and Rec infrastructure, it could probably morph into something very different. I know the Moorfield Optimists are currently fundraising for a roofing structure over the outdoor rink in Moorfield, and $50,000 does not touch it, right? So if you're going to make it into like a legit structure, that's something that's probably a bigger conversation down the road if we make it like I said, a permanent part of our infrastructure. But I think for the interim, the chatter is people seem quite excited about it, right? It's an opportunity. There's an awful lot of outdoor rinks around, but it's yet another opportunity for people, to do something, right, while everything's locked down again. One of my first questions, if I may, is around accessibility, and how we define accessibility, specifically towards our parks and our trail systems. I think there was one picture in the plan where it showed where the Drayton Park kind of went from a path into grass. Is there an expectation? I guess my question is, is there an expectation for a nature trail to be fully accessible, versus some limitations because it's natural? I assume we'd hate to wreck it by putting an asphalt path all the way down through our nature trail, but anybody help me out with kind of what accessibility is defined as in a Parks and Rec setting?
Mr. Bettina?
I may have to defer that to, we have the specialist on board here, maybe Mr. Kelly. has some knowledge as to the definition of accessibility with respect to trails?
Yeah, a lot of our trail planning is more about something for everybody rather than everything for everybody. And that has to do, and I think who Mr. Martin's referring to is it comes down to cost implications and getting things done. So our approach has always been something for everybody. Now the scale and magnitude of what we're offering always has to come into play, and how do we balance that? Technically, it's the staging environment that tends to be a lot more difficult than the actual trail environment itself. I mean, you can throw money at a trail system and certainly get it paved and surfaced in a manner that is acceptable to most mobile devices. Mobility devices, sorry, and that's not difficult, but it's the staging, it's the parking to these things. Where do they get onto the trails? How long are these loops? What kind of circuits and networks are we using here? So our approach has always been, again, I'll say it for the third time, something for everybody, and you really take a strategic approach to that. Things that are affordable, finding out where your community partners are, which ones want to be involved in this development, and it's always a an element in a community that is based on planning horizons, whether it's short, medium, or long term. And you'll notice that in our budget, that we have things that are immediately needed and things that could be pushed out 10 years. So you work with that, and you work on the lengths that you need to provide a suitable trail environment for everybody. But I can tell you, in my experience, we have come across projects where they've tried to make everything accessible to find out that the abilities of the individuals using them is what is the limiting factor, not necessarily the environment they're choosing to use. And having a really deep and introspective look of that, and then aligning that best with the type of terrain, your access points, what they're getting, and what are we connecting is really a bigger deal. And a proper trails plan will certainly point folks in the right direction on that front.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, and thank you for the question, Councillor Martin. Very important that we look at that and see, what can we do to make sure that we are being accessible to a number of people, not everybody, because not everybody's going to be able to access all of our recreation areas, but we certainly provide recreational programming and options for those that need mobility, that have mobility issues. Certainly, I got that question as well, Councillor Martin, and the rest of council, from a number of parents as well that push strollers and are having difficulty pushing strollers through our natural environment, because it goes, like as Councillor Martin pointed out, goes from pavers to grass, and it really can't push a stroller through any of that. So there has been some issues brought up from parents as well with the strollers. Have you got a follow up, Mr. Martin, or I'll move on to someone else? Okay, Councillor Craven, do you have anything?
I got more, but
Yeah, I know. Councillor Craven?
Yeah, I could, a couple of comments. There's only, the only trail in Moorfield is through the bush. It was put there about 30 years ago by the Kelp group from the high school, and I don't think it's been looked at since. At the time it was put in, I walked it several times with 5 different grandchildren, and I don't know, at the time, you probably could have pushed a stroller through if you were careful. And if it hasn't been looked at since, I know you wouldn't be able to now, because all kinds of sticks and so on would be in the trail. So that's the only trail we do have in Moorfield. I definitely support the outdoor rink in Drayton. I guess I'm a little careful. I have an idea how much a new Zamboni would cost us. And I just don't want any damage done to the Zamboni when I'm taking it outside with this surface, because I think they're a couple of $100,000 to buy a new one. It's on the budget to do it in 5 or 6 years, but we just don't want to have to do it any sooner. This is the only thing I'm concerned about with the A service. Sean did mention in his report somewhere along the line that playgrounds and so on were at a bit of a disadvantage if they were put at the one end of a village or a town, because it would be available for people at the other end without a bit of a long trip, probably even a car trip in many cases. And to have it somewhere else in Drayton would be a little better, be a little closer to more of the residential people, but it is pretty handy to have it there. And people are just gonna have to understand that they have to drive to it, they have to drive to it. Pretty any arena you'd have to drive to, so drive to that one too.
Thank you, Councilor Craven. Other questions? Councilor Martin?
So first of all, I love this document, all of 159 pages of it. But there's a lot of information, the needs assessment, how all the different structures and stuff are assessed, and the needs that are, potentially going along with it. I wonder how, we give our staff a fighting chance to make this document successful. There's numerous initiatives that are all considered high priority. And, if I might, I could maybe just highlight a couple that I think are intriguing. And let me get back to it. The first one being, I'll find it eventually, partnerships. So evaluating the different partnerships that we have with the groups across our community. Obviously, Mapleton is Mapleton, but we are a collection of small towns and different service groups that go along with it. And I wonder, what that looks like as far as evaluating our partnerships that we have. I think it's coming up here shortly. And what that looks like. There we are, page 25. Review existing partnerships and develop an agreement plan between partners in the township. We've got, well, the one close to home for me is the Moorfield Athletic Association, right? Which Lucas and his crew look after doing the grass and the upkeep. But there's a volunteer group that's very active in that area as well. And the head of that is very passionate about the MAA and the work that goes into that. At what point, what does reviewing that partnership potentially look like without offending anybody in the work? I would suggest that we're probably at a point now where, maybe we don't need to have our like the facilities in Moorfield looked after by a volunteer group, that we could do that internally. Is that something, is that kind of what reviewing that partnership looks like? Or, Sam, Lucas, I'm not really sure what, I think it's something we should look at, but I'm just not sure how we look at it.
Mr. Mattina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Martin. So the MAA relationship has been discussed with the CAO, and having us control the rentals and the activity on those diamonds, ball diamonds. We do the maintenance already. Having us responsible for establishing the activities on there will certainly be a benefit. We have discussed it, and we do plan to speak to the association about that. The plan, though, with respect to the partnerships, doesn't speak to specifically changing those relationships right now. It mentions that relationships and partnerships are important to build the plan in the long term with respect to the volunteers that are available. The Christian school available for rental, things like that, to add more venues and activities, fostering volunteerism. It's actually one of the strategies later on in the document, strategy number 6. So there's a number of advantages to maintaining and building joint volunteer and joint partnerships, and that's just one of them. So we are looking at MAA activities and further moving into the scheduling. Now that we have a recreation department, it will certainly make things a lot easier to follow that road.
Thank Ms. Martina, Mr. Barron, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. It's been suggested on a few occasions to perhaps approach the MAA and other groups for that matter. And when we try to open a dialogue, we're respectfully but very firmly told to leave well enough alone. This is the way it's been. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it's going to continue to be. So we don't mind opening the communication door one bit. In fact, there are terms that I think can be improved. However, it does seem to be kind of a legacy type of agreement that is almost frowned upon if we want to change it. So it's kind of a balancing act, if you will, as how I from where I sit anyway.
Thank you.
If it isn't
Mr.
broke,
Martin?
don't fix it.
Mr. Martin?
Well, just like anecdotally, Katy, small town where I grew up, right? It's now in the greater town of Chatsworth, I guess, technically, and the local arena was controlled by the board, right? The Katy Community Center board looked after the arena, the maintenance, the upkeep, fundraising, booking, all that stuff, right? And you know, when the municipality kind of took over all of that, it you know, it's taken a little. I'm not going to speak for the town. I don't live there anymore, but I definitely heard some negative feedback about it, right? So I would be, I guess, much like Manny and Sam are talking about, right? You don't want to cause a rift with a local town just because you think it might, you know. But I do think, and we haven't really talked about it yet, but like I do think that whole centralized reservation booking strategy, right, where you could go on the Township of Mapleton website and book some ice time, or you could book the Ball Diamond in Moorfield, or you could book the Ball Diamond in Drayton and pay for it right there. Like, it's 2022, right? And those things, like those, that's the service level I think that the community is starting to expect. And I think Manny brings up a good point. I'm not sure how you get there without you know, hurting any feelings, especially on the part of the volunteer groups that have done, you know, phenomenal work for decades, really, if we're being honest. So I just think that there, especially, you know, there's opportunities there that I think could make it, and not just, you know, not just parks, but we're talking the halls, right? We can't, we have to pay people pretty much to book our halls, right? Like that, there's just not much of a market there. And I think if we'd make it easy for people to do, you know, we wouldn't be hurting ourselves.
Thank Mr. Martin for those comments, and you're absolutely right. That's the direction we need to go with online booking. And whether that includes all of the facilities in the township or just the ones that we currently operate ourselves, that's the discussion we need to be having. But certainly the ones that we currently are doing booking for over the phone should absolutely be done online. And I think Manny and I have talked about that in the past as well, because that's going to be the easiest way, and that's the way, you know, that's the way that people want it. They want to be able to pay their bills online. They want to be able to, you know, get their dog tags online, you know, get the arena online, you know, whatever they want to do, they want to be able to quickly go on to the website, pick a thing and pay for it. So absolutely the direction we need to go. And that's the direction that Mr. Barron has taken us. Mr. Barron?
Without putting, thank you, Your Worship, without putting Amy on the spot, we are going down that direction. And if you don't mind, are we able to give her a little bit of time to talk about what's been happening already and how close we are to achieving that?
Absolutely. Amy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council, we have been working closely with the Finance Department, who looks after a lot of our IT and software. We do have a program that we've all been training on and are getting ready to set up for our citizens to use. It will include camp registrations, rental facilities, anything that they are currently calling in to book, such as soccer fields, ice time. All of that will will be done through their online account. You will also be able to make online payments for those things, including any rec programming that's happening, registrations, those types of things. We are trying to see if there's a way we can get dog tags included in there. I know Patty's busy working on that. So we've all come together with the departments to figure out how to best do this and how to implement it. And we are getting close. The goal definitely is to have that up and running sometime this year. We have been working closely getting the bank side of that set up, or finance has been, and sort of taking direction from them at this point. But it is coming, and hopefully sooner rather than later.
Thank you for the update, Amy. I knew we had that in the pipeline. I'm glad to see we've gone that far. Mr. Martin?
Is this where I show myself out? You were sitting there, Amy, with a straight face and just letting me go on and on and on. So anyway, thank you.
No, it's a great opportunity for Amy to showcase what's been going on behind the scenes, getting us ready for the future, which is, the past actually, because we should have been there already. Councillor Ottens.
Yes, thank you. So backtracking to the legacy programs just for a minute, often those sorts of programs naturally age themselves out. And I think it's a lot easier to just let that happen on its own rather than forcing the issue, because quite often those sorts of systems, they can't find the new replacement people, and then they just sort of come to the township and ask. So often that's the easiest way to jump that hurdle. As far as the booking program, that's great, because I've been, wanting that. I'm advocating for that for a while. Would that be, so if you went online, is the plan so that, say you wanted to book the hall, would you be able to see all the dates and see what's open and what's not, and then just go from there? Okay. And I do anticipate that once COVID is in the rearview mirror, that we will see our halls and facilities booked a lot more. People are just they're just waiting, right? There's groups wanting to book events, and people are just nervous about booking anything because they don't know when the rug's gonna be pulled out from them again. So I think, whenever this happens, it will happen. And I'm looking forward to that.
Amy, do you want to follow up to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Ottens, I agree. There's lots of people, for example, weddings and stuff, people have gotten tired of just pushing them to a new day. So we have lots of things tentatively wanting to run, and it will be great once this new program's up and running that they'll be able to look in and set all of that up on their own. And we'll just be there to support them and help them in any way. And I do agree. I think we will be busy once we can get COVID in the rearview mirror for sure.
Thank you. Further questions, ideas? We've had lots of time to look at this document and digest into it. Councillor Douglas, anything more?
No, I guess my biggest struggle with it is just the timing of where we are in the term and the term of council, with a new council potentially taking effect later this year. So, what ultimately happens with the plan and the budget, associated budget items, is a little bit up in the air. So, I like the plan, and hopefully it continues on through whatever happens with the next term of council.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. So this is a plan that was started out in, I think it was 2012 and updated in 2019, and again being updated now in 2021. And I would assume that, as further, the next council would also look at it, as they should be looking at all strategic plans and plans of action. So good comment, but hopefully it'll be looked at. Mr. Mattina.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may add to Councillor Douglas's comment. So the plan, the master plan is just a guide. And, I don't want council to be discouraged by the budget numbers, and those budget numbers, if council adopts the plan, doesn't mean that the budget is approved. It just means that we're gonna follow that direction. And so as we develop these projects, based on the value, it has to go to council approval anyway. So, be it through a capital budget, year to year, or the capital forecast, whatever the case may be, this is the guide. So staff will use this as a guide, and come 2022 budget time, some of these projects will be in there, and with the capital forecast as well, and council will have the opportunity to either adopt it. And again, if they do adopt the capital plan, it's a year-to-year adoption. It's not a full 10-year approval. So, all these projects are, once again, submitted for approval as we go through.
It gives staff a good running point of how they're going to budget for the 10 years or for the future of their operations. And certainly the Parks and Recreation Strategic Master Plan has given them, that stepping stones. They know where to go. And so if there's anything that you want in here that's not in here, then now's the time to actually talk about it, because then that's going to give direction to staff saying, if you want, we talked about the trails being accessible. If you want to have a certain segment of a trail that's paved, well, now's the time to say we want a paved trail for people to use on with their strollers or people to go rollerblading. Now's the time to do that. Mr. Martina.
If I may add as well, Mr. Mayor. So the where was I going to go with this? My train of thought is gone. Happens to us old guys. Oh, geez. I was going to talk about the budget and moving forward with the. It'll come back to me. Sorry.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe tomorrow.
Councilor Ottens.
Yeah, thank you. Just being on Parks and Rec and going through this whole procedure with the strategic plan. Yeah, it is just, as you said, it's a guide, and a big part of it was determining what the public wanted, right? Like, where do we go? What are the priorities? Trails, signage. I do find that's an important thing we really need to focus on, is wayfinding, because we can throw in all the amenities we want, but if people don't know we even have them, much less where they are, it doesn't really help. And so that was kind of the point behind this whole plan, was to find out what the public really wants, and then that guides us in the right directions. An additional park down at Queen Street there, that was a big project too. And but things can change, just like the project at the arena that we're still waiting about to hear the grant. Things can change in a heartbeat, and throw a pandemic in the mix, and then all your plans can go askew. But the idea behind these strategic plans is to us, and I found it a really interesting process, being on Parks and Rec and going through it all, and just hearing from the public and what they were all interested in and what they weren't interested in too. That's also an eye opener.
Thank you. And Mr. Martina, do you remember what you were talking about now?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So I want to mention, just comment on Mr. Douglas's comments on the budget. Through the whole process, through the development of the plan, we have applied for grant programs, and we have one that's imminently going to be awarded. So once we get a confirmation, we've got upgrades planned to the baseball diamonds in Drayton. So right away, there's a project that's already listed on the master plan that if the grant funding comes down the pipes, we've got the money already to do the work. So it's a dynamic thing, and staff is always looking for these opportunities as we go along. So, again, the budget is there. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is a taxed impact, because there are programs out there that we will take advantage of.
Thank you, Mr. Martina. And just a question that I have, and it has to do with the baseball at the Drayton Park, and I guess the Moorfield as well. There's on the, and maybe Mr. Kelly can answer this question, because in this document, it talks about the batting cages, and it talks about the batting cages, I guess, is even back in 2012, it's talking about the batting cages, and if they're not going to be maintained, to get rid of them and to move them out. So this is a question of Mr. Kelly. So obviously this must have been a problem back in 2012 that, it came up in the document, and it must still be a valid question, because I know that last year we had a problem with one of the cages not getting mowed and all the rest. Should we be looking at removing those cages? And if it's been a problem over this time?
I can certainly jump in there, Mayor Davidson. I know when we started this in 2012, our baseline for the project was nil. I mean, no one really knew anything about any of the facilities in the town. No one knew anything, and we thought we would approach it by saying, let's do an assessment of everything we can find, bring that to the public, get some commentary on that, and just really get some good input on the value of such equipment, namely batting cages in this case, and what did it really mean to the community. It was at that time, it was determined that these were actually more of a nuisance, and we weren't in an ability, or we didn't have the capacity to actually maintain them the way they need to be maintained. Do you need them? They're a good thing to have. Does every municipality have them? Absolutely not. And if they're a problem and it's easier to actually get rid of them and get rid of the nuisance or the issues, you do it. Not a big deal. So that is a carryover, but it is something we had heard from the community at the time. And as I look at all the cherry faces on the screen tonight, not anyone from the 2012 year, I believe, was at those meetings. I can't recall. It's all new personalities around the table right now. And that's the great thing about a strategy approach rather than just, I know it's called a master plan, but master plans tend to be snapshots in time. This is what you get. This is the snapshot, the picture we take. This is how we're going to develop it. A strategy, and has more strategy in it, is something that evolves with time. And as those legacy projects die and people's connections and values on certain things in the community move along because those generations are long gone and not, we're creating new systems and processes and dealing with them. This is such one of those things. In my opinion, just to be really blunt, I would get rid of the batting cages. I think you solve a couple of problems right from the get-go, and it's pretty inexpensive to do. And there's little maintenance after the fact. So I have no problem saying that online or being recorded with that. To me, they can go away. I'd also like to point that the implementation strategies in the document, it's 3 pages. That's the carryout. I mean, sure, you get certainly information on all the facilities that were in the works or certainly being used at the time of the drafting of the document, but the implementation strategies provide all the information you really need, other than the budget itself. And again, I just want to emphasize that you don't have to do any of this really, but what you have is this ongoing listing of things that might happen in the short, the medium, or long term. And as I listen to Amy talk about some of the capacity building, even on her own side, learning how to do this to create this online sort of opportunity and process for the municipality. I mean, that was something that was considered a short-term planning horizon for us to get done. So we had put that in the report. So getting sort of reservations had a high recommendation from us because you got to catch up. And in some cases, these things hadn't been dealt with in the past. And but like I say, as we look around the table right now, or certainly around the screen, we have new personalities and new faces, and that means we have different capacities, and we enhance those capacities. And as one of the strategies says, preserve the best, reinforce the rest, or build the rest, that sort of thing. Is just kind of look at those things you can do now, move on, and work towards the other ones as time comes. So I think you're in a pretty good situation, and everything I've been hearing from everyone putting their 2 cents in seems to be totally in line with what I think the spirit of the document was initially conceived.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. A good answer. And so I got to ask, Sam, and I also ask Lucas as well. Do we know how much these batting cages are used? I'm not the baseball guy. I'm not at the park. How well are they used?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will defer that to Lucas because he's the man. He's the boots on the ground, and he can probably give us a better answer.
Thank you, Sam, through you and through the mayor. They pre-COVID, they were used. The one in Drayton was used, I would say, on a weekly basis. For that, I can't speak to I'd have to defer to Gertie or the MAA on how much that was used. I do know that they house both of them have the machines there, and they have been used prior to the last 2 years. relatively regularly. If it's a maintenance issue on the grass that was there, I know there's, that speaks to more, I think, just a maintenance kind of strategy, or if it got missed that time, or just with the staff we're using and training in that respect. So that, we can chalk that up to that. As for the use, though, I do know pre-COVID they were being used on a bi-weekly, if not a weekly basis.
Thank you. That's the answer I wanted to know. I'm just going from the document all the way back to 2012. It was a concern with the batting cages, and if it's being used out there, and that's great. And we want them to. That's what we want them there for people to use them. So I'm hoping that all the baseball folks out there send me emails saying how much they use it, because I'm really interested to find out how much is it actually used. Councillor Craven?
They're the people we should ask if they want them there and need them there. I know when they were put there, they were used a couple of times a week, but whether they've been used anymore lately or not, I don't know. I know there is one in Palmerston. I do see it a bit, and they do use it a nice bit. But whether they're using the ones here or not, I don't know. But we should ask the ball people whether they want them or not. And I know if they're not used and not maintained, they are a bit of an eyesore for sure.
Yeah, they are. And I also note, Mr. Bettina, that at the Moorfield Diamond, it's noted there all the way back to 2012 about the dugouts, and the fans can't see. Do we have a plan in place to help the sight lines?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So when we do tackle the projects at Moorfield, we will look at all those aspects, all the intricacies that go with it, and if there's drainage issues, and we'll talk about we'll look at improving all the areas that need improvement. Once we start working on the diamonds, we'll create a plan that will encompass as many or all of the requirements, and then we'll price it accordingly. And if we have to phase it in, we'll phase it in depending on the costs.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess that goes to the tennis courts with the lining needing to be done there, and maybe the netting. I know that they do get used as well. Further questions from council? Councilor Martin.
I've got a question for Mr. Kelly, but I'll chime in on the batting cages real quick. I think, the use might be tied to accessibility. Most of those machines, I think, are owned by the different associations, and under lock and key, I think there was issues with damage and maybe theft back in the day, right? So those aren't $50 machines, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it goes back to a reservation system or something, where if Mike Martin and his 10-year-old kid want to go hit some balls, if there'd be an ability to, I'm responsible for that hour on that Friday afternoon, and if it gets damaged, it's my fault. I think just right now it's tough for Gen Pop to actually use them, right? And so I don't know if that's something we could maybe figure out with the different associations. And maybe you're not a ball player, but you want to go hit some balls, right? And get a little sore. Moorfield used to be a baseball hub, right? And I think there's a group of kids that are coming up that want to play, boys and girls. I think the premise, if it's not being used, I 100% agree with Mr. Kelly. If it's going to be an eyesore, pickup truck and $100 will get those cages towed away pretty quick, right? So, but the question for Mr. Kelly, page 51, we talk about pools, and there's going to be snickers and smiles, I think, from council on this, but I was just curious about the statement about Mapleton's size and the sustainability of a pool, whether that be outdoor, indoor, both. I know that, pools were something that we've received a fair amount of feedback, even when we were discussing the grant application for the PMD. Pools kind of came in pretty strong as far as the number of respondents go. But what sort of calculation, or what's your methodology for determining whether something would be sustainable or not?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Martin. Typically, what we look at when it comes to pools is just, you can look at local draw, and I mean, catchment areas versus regional draw and catchment areas, and that tends to be it. We look at who's got what where, to tell you the truth, what type of pool and what kind of draw or appeal do they have. Every community you go to wants a pool. Every community you go to where they want an indoor arena, now it's a double ice pad at the very least. Everyone wants the $350,000 skate park. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes. And it really does not matter at what scale or size that community may be at. And, the Jones always wants what the Smiths have down the road. And I'm not saying Mapleton's one of those communities, but we know what to expect of a lot of the communities we do work in and what their expectations are. It would probably be negligent for me to say that a community the size of Mapleton should have a pool for its own population. Basically, just because we find that the numbers that you do have and the amount of travel, the geographic range within Mapleton probably precludes the use of that, where someone on one of the outskirts would probably be better service going to an adjacent community for their pool, rather than driving to the one you may create in your own community. And where does it go? Likely in Drayton, I guess, would be the answer, where the population center may be. But Drayton's not that far from other communities that would have pool as well. So when we start looking at that, it's one thing to get the pool, it's one thing to get more is better and get the bigger pool elsewhere or the newer pool elsewhere and those sort of things. So you start getting into those conversations. The other thing is a staffing issue. If you notice, every rural community, certainly in this part of the world, their pools are pretty much shut. If they're outdoor, they're shut by Labor Day. And they certainly don't start till high school's out or the college kids are back. So it's a very limited season. And there's a lot of dollars that goes into pool maintenance and operation for a very limited season. And then what kind of pool do we build and who do we service? So it just becomes problematic, I think. And for in this case, to be really direct with your question, it had to do with the scale of the community, the population base, and where they're located within the geographic range of Mapleton.
Go ahead, Mr. Martin, for the follow-up.
So just as a secondary then, so how much would you look at a pool or any other sort of, parks and rec facility, whether it's the ice pad or otherwise, how much do you look at something like that as an economic driver, right? Like do we lose, business by having our people in Drayton, Moorfield, wherever, heading to Palmerston or Elmira for swimming lessons, right? Then they stop and grab a chocolate bar and refuel their car and then come back and suddenly there's, $50 that could have been spent in Drayton or Moorfield. Is there an argument for that, or should it just simply be viewed as an amenity?
No, that's a great question. And I mean, it's part of the equation. The cost benefit analysis of certainly doing a pool and understanding whether you can make money, break even, or at least retain the money within your own place, I guess, is really part of that question. And that's where I was trying to go, where, bigger, more, better, who has the better facility, where, and are what people willing to drive. Well, if I can just go down to, so-and-so community and get my shopping done down there as well as use the pool for lessons or instructional purposes. I mean, it gets, where I'm going with that, it gets pretty complex pretty quickly. In this case for Mapleton, for me, it was, I realized 75% of its pool users go outside, travel outside the township. And we knew that. That certainly was the case way back in 2012, and certainly with the later survey, whether it's aquafit, recreational, instructional type of swimming. And, I think as much as you want it offered by the township, I was interested that only 50% of those people thought that the actual township should be offering it. That tells me 50% of those people are happy going elsewhere. And why are they doing that? And that's important. So again, when I look at the size of the township and I wonder, could they sustain a pool, whether we should build it? And most people, there's very few people doing outdoor pools. There'll be an indoor pool of some size. Then what kind of facility are you getting into, and what are the costs on that? And I think you'd be a long time paying for it from user fees anyways. If you can get it granted, that's one thing. But what I know of granted facilities in smaller municipalities is it's the operational costs and the maintenance costs that actually get to them. It's not the capital cost.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Very thorough answer. Thank you so much. Mr. Martin, you have anything further with that?
No, thank you. I was really interested to see where you were coming from on it. It's, certainly I've received feedback on it. But just because people want it, does dollars and cents match up? I don't know, right? So fascinating.
And Mr. Kelly, was there, and just going along with Councillor Martin, he talked about, or you talked about a double pad as well. What population base do you put a double rink in?
Well, I'm maybe the wrong guy to ask for that because I'm actually not a big hockey player myself or skater myself. I like the outdoors, but not indoors on ice. So for me, the magic number, I think the standard out there is usually about 45,000 minimum. That's your draw.
So you need a population of about 45,000 before you put a second rink in. Okay.
Or a
you.
draw, that complement,
draw.
a regional and catchment area to support that.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Craven, you got a question?
Yeah, in regard to the swimming pool, for people here in Moorfield, we're not very much further to go to Palmerston than we are to go to Drayton to a pool. Same with the southwest of the township. They would easily able to go to Listowel, would be closer than Drayton. In the northwest, either Arthur or Fergus would be just about as close as Drayton. Same thing in the southwest, be closer to go to Elmira than Drayton. So to put a pool in Drayton and expect everybody from Mapleton to use it would not likely be too reasonable. However, I do agree with Mike that if we don't have a pool, are we missing out on some development with businesses and residential? It could be that the payback for putting in a pool might be there through more taxes because of business and residents. So it's something we might have to have a look at yet.
Thank you, Mr. Craven. Further questions? Councillor Craven?
And in regard to facilities, we have a soccer field in Drayton. I don't suppose we should talk to the soccer people and see if down the road, not next year, this year or next year, but 5 and 10 years from now, if they think there would be anything to warrant putting a soccer field in Moorfield, because if do they think soccer is going to grow? I have personally doubted it would, but we should talk to the people and see if we could use a soccer field here. One thing we don't have in Drayton that we do in Glenallen and Moorfield is a tennis court. And I wonder if a tennis court would be something we should look at for Drayton. It's reasonable exercise even for seniors. It's not too strenuous, not as strenuous as going out maybe in skating and so on, but it would get them outdoors doing something with some exercise. And I know a tennis court is not that expensive to put in. The biggest part of it is the surface that you would put on the floor of it. So I think we should be certainly looking at a tennis court possibly in Drayton.
And thank you, Mr. Craven, Councillor Craven, for that. I do agree. A tennis court or even tennis court / pickleball court, because pickleball
One or
seems
the
to
other,
be
yeah.
something that's going on. If we have tennis courts already in Moorfield and in Glenallen, maybe something pickleball would be what we'd put in Drayton, but something certainly I think that should be looked at. It's not in the plan at all. Of course, probably back in 2012, pickleball wasn't a big thing, Mr. Kelly, so probably wasn't in there for that reason. How many communities, Mr. Kelly, are putting in pickleball courts, for example?
Every community we're talking to is talking about it. I don't know of one that has one right now that we've worked on, but it always comes up. It always comes up.
Well, you're talking about the draw, Councillor Craven and Councillor Martin, the pool, people drawing outside. Maybe we become the pickleball, capital of the area, and everyone will come here and play pickleball if we put in a nice facility. There's always other aspects to it, but something that we shouldn't certainly look at. I know there's information in the documentation that we have here about the number of tennis courts per population.
Yeah.
I think we're actually at the right number of tennis courts we currently have per population, according to the document. But certainly look at some maybe other aspects. Anybody else? Councilor Martin.
I got a real quick one. If this is going to be a 2022 document, essentially, is there any way we can scour this document and remove any reference to a dog park whatsoever? I know it's only going to be a guide, but this council's been emphatic on numerous occasions that dog parks are not welcome and don't have any support. I'd hate to see it remain in our guide moving forward unless it's a extraordinarily low priority item. I say it kind of in jest, but is that something we could do? Or is this
Mr.
document already finalized and paid for and as is?
Mr. Bettina?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Martin. Yeah, I see Dog Park is mentioned on page 83 for short-term proposals for, it looks like Drayton Ridge Community Park. So definitely that can be stricken from the record, expunged, if you like. And
Mr. Rogerson, you didn't have that in your plan for the park, did you?
That is a negative.
And this
Okay.
this is a draft still until council approves it. And of course, if any changes are required, we will be glad to make those changes.
Okay. Anybody want to keep dog park in this document? Speak up now. I don't see harm having it in there. If it's just like I said, it's a document that is moving as council moves, as people move, as time goes on. Mr. Kelly, you had a hand up?
I did, thank you. I'm not married to anything that's in the document other than it's actually been informed by through a community process. And so, if you're going to start pulling things out after the fact, I suppose is what would only worry me. But because it's in there doesn't mean you have to do it. It's one of those things that it was expressed by the community, so it was shown.
Hey, Mr. Kelly, it is a living document, and so as Mr. Kelly said, it's just because it's there, don't have to do it. We've talked about this before. There's other things in here that we might want to do, like a pickleball court. That's not in here. We might want to do that. Do we add that in now? I don't know. But we pull things. I'm a little reluctant to pull things out that we've discussed when it's in the plan from 2012. 10 years, 5 years from now, the next council might say yes to a dog park. Who knows? Councilor Martin, Ottens?
Yeah, the importance of keeping the document kind of as it's been developed is it's a record too of what was decided back in the day. Again, we don't have to, it's not a command, it's a suggestion. And it's just important, you don't know how things are going to change down the road, and it's something to refer to just as we look at the 2012 document and find it interesting what was recommended then and what we did then and how we progressed from there. This document's also important to look back on later as a guide and as a historical little piece of information. Even if it's recent history, it's important to have as a record. So I think we just keep what's there. As far as a tennis court in Drayton, I don't think anyone in the entire survey requested that. So I don't know if we need to even pursue such a thing.
That's why I was suggesting pickleball, Marlene.
Yeah, but don't you do that inside though? Isn't
I don't know.
pickleball done inside?
Mr. Kelly, you got outdoor courts for pickleball?
Either, you have both.
Because then you can do it year round, right?
That you don't have to rent the facility or go and wait for the facility to be available. Be
No.
just like the tennis, be like the tennis courts, just show up.
Yeah, and hence the $50,000 charge on a nice outdoor ice rink. I mean, it just depends on how you're tying that into. I mean, Center Wellington has a great outdoor ball hockey club that's summer based. So I mean, that's how we can. I want to say leverage, perhaps. I mean, there's more capital input, obviously, but there is a leveraging based on the versatility of the facility you're building. So you could use probably your outdoor ice pad as a bit of a pickleball court if you design it appropriately.
Let's look at that. Mr. Kelly's already got a solution for the outdoor pickleball court. Further comments, questions on this document? Nothing else? We've gotten everything. We've talked it all out. Going once, going twice. Mr. Martin, I knew you were waiting for something.
Well, no, I just wanted to say thank you. You know, I guess it was kind of my suggestion that we pick an evening and sit around and kind of chew through this document. So honestly, I just want to say thank you for everyone's time, from our staff, Mr. Kelly, council, for taking an evening just to kind of go through this and chit chat. There's a lot of information here, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. And, you know, it is 10 minutes after 8. So obviously using the whole hour up in a regular council meeting would have put us past the midnight. So I'm glad that we had this on a different day. So I have a recommendation here that has been put forward by the clerk. And it's item 4.1. Mapleton Parks and Recreation Strategic Master Plan Update. Recommendation that Township of Mapleton Council receive Public Works Report PW 2021-13 dated January 10th, 2022 regarding the Township of Mapleton Parks and Recreation Strategic Master Plan Update. And that the Township of Mapleton Parks and Recreation Strategic Master Plan Update dated July 21st be adopted as recommended by the Parks and Recreation Committee of Council. And for the Township of Mapleton Council, authorize staff to implement the Township of Mapleton Parks and Recreation Strategic Master Plan Update beginning in 2022. I need a mover, please. Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens. Anybody opposed? Then that is carried. Thank you very much. The notice of provision was there in item 5.1, and we'll just move on to the confirmatory bylaw, item 6.1. The recommendation by that bylaw number 2022-005 being a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of the council of the corporation of the Township of Mapleton be hereby read a first, second, and third time, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. Moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Douglas. Thank you. Anybody opposed? And that is also carried. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your input, and for staff as well. And we will see most of you tomorrow at our regular council meeting. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mr. Kelly. Thank you.